I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist, or sexist, or bigoted. But in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist. But they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning. But I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. Can't believe the mice in my house are unionizing. How am I going to get them to agree to some kind of contract to leave my... Oh, God damn it. All right. Sit down, you little idiot. And welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. This is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to continue to read The Legend of the Seventh Virgin by Victoria Holt. About the author? Sure. Eleanor Alice Hibbert was born September 1st, 1906, and died January 18th, 1993. She was an English writer of historical romances. She published several books a year in different literary genres, each genre under a different pen name, like Jean Pleady for her European royalty history, Victoria Holt for Gothic romances, and Philip Carr for multi-generational family sagas. Fun facts? Well, it turns out there's not a lot on her, so we're just going to learn about the history of Gothic fiction. It turns out it was first established with the publication of Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto in 1764. Though it was originally titled The Castle of Otranto, a story translated by William Marshall, Gent, from the original Italian of Onoporo Malorto, canon of the Church of St. Nicholas of Otranto. The book, that's a very long, insanely long title. I can understand why they cut it down. The book blends elements of realist fiction with supernatural and fantastical, establishing many of the plot devices and the character types that become typical of the Gothic novel. Secret passages, clanging trap doors, pictures beginning to move, and doors closing by themselves. Story overview, this is how ridiculous this is. I'm going to take up this whole part just going over the story of the first Gothic romance novel ever made. It begins on the wedding day of his sickly son Conrad and Princess Isabella. Shortly before the wedding, however, Conrad is crushed to death by a gigantic helmet that falls on him from above. Manfred, the father, is terrified that Conrad's death signals the beginning of the end for his line, so he decides to marry Isabella himself and divorce his current wife, Hippolyta, because she hasn't provided her with an heir except for the sickly kid that just died from the giant helmet. But Isabella escapes to a church with the aid of a peasant named Theodore. Manfred orders Theodore's death while talking to Friar Jerome, who's keeping Isabella safe. When Theodore removes his shirt to be killed, Jerome recognizes a marking below his shoulder that identifies Theodore as the friar's son. Jerome begs for his son's life, but Manfred says Jerome must either give up the princess or his son's life, and they are interrupted by a trumpet, and all of a sudden knights come in from another kingdom who want to deliver Isabella back to her father, Frederick. Along with the castle, as Frederick apparently has a stronger claim to the castle that this is all taking place in, which is the reason why he wants to wed Isabella. This leads to the knights and Manfred to race to find Isabella. Theodore, having been locked in the tower by Manfred, is freed by Manfred's daughter. So there you go. That's just a sampling of how ridiculous this stuff can get. Why don't we go down to the smoking room and continue reading our book. Part 2, since there's no chapters and I have to make up my own. I nodded. I went to see one of the maids that was in the kitchens. He taught me that in the garden, and that was when he fancied me. Promised a job for Pedro that'd be safer and better paid than working in the mine. If I'd be sensible. Pedro, you never knew, and I stood out against him. I loved Pedro. I was going to marry Pedro, and there weren't going to be nobody for me but Pedro. And then, Well, things started going wrong for Pedro. The St. Lamston mine was being worked then, and we was in his power. I thought he'd forget me, but he didn't. And the more I stood out, the more he wanted me. Pedro never knew. That was the miracle. So, Bert, one night before we was married, I went along to him, for I said that if it could be a secret and he'd let Pedro alone, it'd be better than the way it were. Oh, Granny! Oh, it shocks you, lovey. I'm glad. But I'm gonna make you see that I had to do it. I thought of it since I know I was right. It was like what I told you, making your own future. Mine was Pedro. I wanted to be together always in the cottage and our children around us. Boys looking like Pedro, girls looking like me. And I thought, what's once if it'll buy that future for us? And I was right, for it would have been the end of Pedro. You don't know what he were like. Oh, that long ago, Sir Justin. He didn't have no feelings for the likes of we. We were like the pheasants. They'd be shooting now, bred up for his sport. Oh, he'd have killed Pedro in time, and I'd have put him on a dangerous work. But I had to make him leave us alone, because I could see that this were like sport to him, so I went to him first. I hate the Larnstons, I said. Times change. Carinsa. I'm going with Carinsa. I don't know. I know I'm probably saying it wrong, but God, what a stupid name. And people change with them. Times is cruel. Hard, but not quite so cruel as hard as when I was your age. When your children come, then times will be a little easier for them. It's the way of things. Granny, what happened then? Oh, it weren't the end. Once weren't enough. He liked me too well. Oh, this black hair of mine that Pedro loved so much. Oh, he liked it too. Oh, there was a blight on my first year of marriage, Karen, sir. It should have been so fine and grand, but I had to go to him, you see, and if Pedro had known, he would have killed him, for passion ran high in his dear heart. You were frightened, Granny. Oh, she frowned as though trying to remember. Yeah, it was sort of a wild gamble. I went on for nigh on a year, and then I found that I was to have a child, and I didn't know whose. Karen, sir, I wouldn't have this child. I wouldn't. I saw it all through the years. Looking like him, deceiving Pedro. Oh, it wouldn't be like a stain that would ever be washed out. Oh, I couldn't do it. So I didn't have the child, Karen, sir. I was very, it's another screw up in the book. Whoever published this book that I actually paid for on Amazon, you can burn in hell, because you transcribed it poorly. I came near to dying, but I didn't have the child, and that were the end as far as I was concerned. He forgot me then. Oh, I tried to make it up to Pedro. He said I was the gentlest woman in the world with him, though I could be fierce enough with everyone else. Oh, it pleased him, Karen, sir. Oh, it made him happy. And sometimes I think the reason I was so gentle with him and did all I could to please him was because I'd wronged him. And that seemed strange to me, like good out of evil. That made me understand a lot about life. That was the beginning of my being able to help others. So, Karen, sir, you should never regret any experience, good or evil. For there's some good in what's bad, just as there's bad in the good. Oh, sure, as I sit there in the woods beside you. 2 years later, your mother was born. Our daughter, Pedro's and mine. And her birth nearly killed me. Oh, and I couldn't have no more. Oh, it's all along for what happened before. I'm thinking, but it was a good life. The years pass and evil is forgotten, and many a time I've looked into the past and I've said to myself, you couldn't have done different. It was the only way. But why should they be able to spoil our lives? I demanded passionately. Well, there's strong and weak in the world, and if you're born weak, you must find strength, or it'll come if you look. I shall find strength, Granny. Oh, yes, girl, you will if you want. It's for you to say. Granny, how I hate St. Lamston's, I repeated. Nay, he is dead and gone long since. Don't hate the children for the parents' sins, as Leaf, blame yourself for what I did. But it is a happy life. And there came a day of sorrow. Pedro had gone off to his first shift of the day, and I knew he'd be blasted down the mine, and we're one of the trammers who'd go in when he fuses had been blown and load the ore into trucks. Well, I don't know what happened down there. No one could ever truly know, but all that day I waited at the top of the shaft for them to bring him out. 12 long hours I waited, and when they brought him, he weren't my gay and loving Pedro no more. He were alive, though, for a few minutes. Just time to say goodbye before he went. Bless you, he did say to me. Thank you for my life. And what could he have said better than that? I tell myself, even if he hadn't been a Sir Justin, even if I had given him healthy sons, he couldn't have said a better thing than that. She stood up abruptly, and we went to the cottage. For Joe had gone out with Squab, I hate these names, and she took me to the storehouse, and it was like an old wooden box there, which was always kept locked, and she opened this and showed me what was inside. Now there were 2 Spanish combs and mantellas. Ooh, it's a mantella. Looking it up. Mantella. Lace or silk scarf worn by women over their hair and shoulders. Well, that was boring. She put on one of the combs in her hair and covered her hair with a mantella. There, she said. That was how he liked me to look. What? He said when he made his fortune that he would take me to Spain and I'd sit on a balcony and just fan myself while the world went by. You look lovely, Granny. One of these is for you when you're older. This is weird. This is how my husband liked to dress me up. Here, one day I'll let you dress up like my husband liked me to dress. And when I die, they're both for you. Then she put the second comb and mantella on my head. This is gross. And we stood side by side. It was surprising how much alike we were. I was glad that she had confided in me something which I knew had no other living person. I shall never forget that moment when we stood side by side in our combs and mantellas, incongruous among the pans and the herbs. And outside, the sound of guns, I awoke to moonlight. Although not much of it came into our cottage, there was a silence about me which is unusual. I sat up on the Talfat and wondered what was wrong. No sound or anything. Not Joe's breathing, nor Granny's. And I remember that Granny had gone out to help at a childbirth, weird, and often did, and then we never knew when she'd be coming home. So it was not surprising that she was absent, but where was Joe? Joe, I said. Joe, where are you? And I peered to his end of the Talfat. He wasn't there. Squab, I called. I hate these names. And there was no answer. I descended the ladder. It did not take more than a second or two to explore the cottage, and I went to the storehouse, but Joe wasn't there either. And I suddenly thought of the last time that I had been here when Granny had dressed my hair and decked me out in Spanish comb mantella. She's still thinking about it. This is so gross. And I remembered the sounds of the guns. Was it possible that Joe had been such a fool as to go into the woods to look for wounded birds? What? Was he mad? If he had went into the woods, he'd be trespassing. And if he were caught, this is the time of year when trespassing was considered doubly criminal. I wondered how long he'd been gone. I opened the cottage door and looked out, sensing it to be just after midnight. Went back to the cottage, sat down, not knowing what to do. I wish Granny would come in. We would have to speak to Joe, make him understand the danger he ran into doing such a reckless thing. So I waited, and still Granny did not come, nor did Joe. And I reckoned that I had sat there for an hour when I could endure it no longer. So I dressed, and leaving the cottage, made my way toward the Abbess Woods. It was a still and beautiful night. Everything seemed slightly weird, but enchanting, touched by moonlight. And I thought of the 6 virgins and wished that I were making that trip to see the stones, which I had promised myself instead of coming out to look for Joe. Well, there was a chill in the air, but I was glad of it, and I ran all the way to the woods. I stood on the edge of them, wondering what to do next, and I daren't call Joe, for if any of the gameskeepers should be about, that would attract their attention. Yet if Joe had gone into the woods, it would not be easy for me to find him. Joe, I thought, you fool. Why do you have to have this obsession when it makes you do things like this, which could bring us trouble? Great trouble. Well, I stood by the board, which I knew said private, and told people that if they trespassed, they would be prosecuted. These boards were all over the woods. As a warning, Joe, I whispered, then wondered if I spoke too loudly. I went a little way into the woods and thought how silly I was. It is better to go home. He might be there by now. Horrible pictures kept flashing in and out of my mind. Suppose he found a wounded bird. This bird thing is weird. Suppose he were caught with the bird. Oh, but if he were foolish, there was no need for me to be. Oh, I should go back to the cottage, climb to the Talfat, and then go to sleep. But there was nothing I could do. But I found it difficult to leave the woods because Joe was my charge, and I must look after him. I should never forgive myself if I failed him. I prayed there in the woods at night, and nothing bad should happen to my brother. The only time I thought of praying is when I wanted something, and when I prayed with all my being, desperately and earnestly, and waited for God to answer, nothing happened. But I still stood, hoping. I was delaying returning, because something told me that Joe wouldn't be back at the cottage if I did go back. When I heard a sound, I was alert, listening. It was the whine of a dog. Squab, I whispered. I hate the name Squab. And I seemed to have spoken louder than I thought, for my voice echoed through the woods. A rustling of undergrowth then, and there he was, thrusting against me. Ooh, making low whining noises, looking at me as though he wanted to tell me something. I knelt down. Squab, where is he, Squab? Where's Joe? Burp. When he ran a little distance from me, stopped and looked at me. Oh, I knew he was trying to tell me that Joe was somewhere in the woods, and that he would take me to him. So I followed Squab. When I saw Joe, I was numb with terror. I could only stand still staring at him, and that hideous contraption in which he was held. And I could think of nothing, so great was my despair. Joe, caught in the prohibited woods, caught in a man-trap. I tried to pull at the cruel steel, but it would not yield to my puny strength. Joe, I whispered. Squab whined, rubbed against me, looking up at me, imploring me to help, but Joe did not answer me. Frantically, I pulled at those hideous teeth that I could not pry them apart. Panic took hold of me, and I had to release my brother before he was found in that trap. If he were alive, they would take him off to the magistrates. Sir Justin would have no mercy. If he were alive, he must be alive. One thing I could not bear was that Joe should be dead. Anything but that. For while he lived, I could always do something to save him. I could do something. You could always do what you want to, provided you tried enough, was one of Grant's maxims, which I believed everything she told me. And now, when I was confronted by something difficult, the most important task that I ever had to perform, I couldn't do it. Oh, God, my hands were bleeding. I did not know how to prise open this frightful thing, and I was putting all my strength into it, and I couldn't do it. Oh, there must be another way. One person alone could not open a man-trap. Oh, I must get help. Granny must come back with me. But Granny, for all her wisdom, was an old woman. Would she be able to open the trap? She could do anything, I assured myself. Yes, I mustn't waste any more time. I must go back to Granny. Squab was looking at me with expectant eyes. Well, I touched him and said, stay by him. And then I sped away. Well, I ran more quickly than I ever done before, and yet how long it seemed to take me to reach the road. All the time I was listening for the sound of voices. If Sir Justin's gamekeepers formed Joe before I could save him, it would be disastrous. I imagined my brother cruelly treated, whipped, enslaved. My breathing sounded as though I were sobbing as I flung myself across the road. Perhaps that's why I was not aware of a ring of footsteps until they were almost upon me. Hi, said a voice. What's wrong? Oh, I knew the voice. It was that of an enemy, one that had called Kim. Oh, he mustn't catch me. He mustn't know, I told myself. And he started to run. And he had longer legs than I. He caught my arm and pulled me around to look at him. He whispered, Karen, sir, of the well. Let me go. Why'd you fly through the countryside at midnight? Are you a Visage? Ugh. I hate this book is all messed up. I don't know what a Visage is going to be. Are you a witch? Maybe? Yes, you are. You threw away your broomstick. Oh, look at me. When you heard me coming. Well, I tried to twist my arm free, But he wouldn't let me go. He brought his face close to mine. "You're frightened," he said. "Of me?" I tried to kick him. "I'm not frightened of you." Then I thought of Joe lying in that trap, and I was so miserable and felt so helpless that tears came to my eyes. His manner changed suddenly. He said, "Look, I'm not going to hurt you." And then I must have felt that there is something kind about someone who could speak in a voice like that. He was young, strong, and towered above me. And in that moment, a thought came to me. "Oh, he might know how to open the trap." I hesitated. I knew how to. He had to act quickly. I wanted Joe to live more than anything, and if you're going to live, he had to be rescued quickly. Actually, I think I've always heard that if something gets punctured into your body, like a knife or a piece of wood, I don't know, that you're not supposed to take it out. You're supposed to just bring it with you to the hospital, because that thing is probably the only thing keeping you from bleeding out all over the place. Like if you pull it out, you're just going to bleed more. So there's really not a rush. I took a chance the moment I take it and regret it, but it was done. There was no turning back. It's my little brother," I said. "Where?" I looked toward the woods. "In a trap." "Oh, good God," he cried. "Then show me." When I led him there, Squab came running to meet us. Kim was very serious now, but he knew how to set up opening the trap. "Though I don't know if we can manage it," he warned me. "We must." I spoke fiercely, and his mouth turned up slightly at the corners. "We will," he assured me, and then I knew that we could. He told me what to do, and we worked together, but the cruel spring was reluctant to release its prisoner. I was glad, so glad that I had asked his help, because I knew that Granny and I could never have done it. "Press with all your might," he commanded. But I put all my weight on the wicked steel as slowly Kim released the spring. He gave a deep sigh of triumph. We had freed Joe. "Joey," I whispered, just as I used to when he was a baby. "Don't be dead. You mustn't be." A dead pheasant had fallen to the ground as we had pulled my brother out of the trap. I saw Kim's quick glance at it, but he did not comment on it. "I think his leg's broken," he said. "But we'll have to be careful. It'll be easier if I carry him." He lifted Joe gently in his arms, and I loved Kim at that moment because he was quiet and gentle, and he seemed to care what became of us. Squab and I walked beside him while he carried Joe, and I felt triumphant. But when we reached the road, I remembered that, as well as being Gentry, Kim was also a friend of St. Lamson's. He might well have been a member of the afternoon shooting party, and to these people, the preservation of the birds was more important than the lives of people like us. I said anxiously, Where are you going?" "Dr. Hillard. He needs immediate attention." "No," I said in a panic. "What do you mean?" "Well, don't you see? He'll ask where we found him. And they'll know someone's been in a trap. They'll know, don't you see?" "Stealing pheasants," said Kim. No, he never stole. He wanted to help the birds. He cares about the birds and animals. And you can't take him to the doctor. Please. I caught his coat and looked up at him. Where then?" "Well, to our cottage. My granny is a good doctor. Then no one will know." And he paused, and I thought he would ignore my plea, but then he said, "All right, but I think he needs a doctor. He needs to be home with me and his granny." "Well, you're determined to have your way. It's wrong, though. Now, he's my brother. You know what they would do to him." "Fine, show me the way," he said, and I led him to the cottage. Well, that seems as good a place as any to take a break. And since I'm all about showing off my mansion, and I love to change rooms whenever I do something different, like, I don't know, I'm going to go sneeze, I go out into the hallway. But for this, I want to let you know about the latest upcoming books from Penguin Random House, so why don't we go upstairs to the closet, where I'm going to play a guitar at you. I see you've made it to the closet, and here I am just casually playing this guitar. And I wanted to let you know about a new book from Penguin Random House called Unrealistic Expectations by Andy J. Christopher. That's 2 first names for the first and last name. I bet you the middle name is just John, Andy John Christopher. Doesn't matter. About unrealistic expectations? When a relationship therapist gets dumped right before her new dating handbook hits the shelves, oh boy, she fakes dates to save face in the spicy romantic comedy. Now, there's a lot of things that go wrong on an author's publication day, but breaking up with her long-term boyfriend might just be at the top of Jessica Gallagher's list. Oh, she didn't expect to run into her old crush, Galvin Barker. Galvin's a weird name. The very next day. When Jessica goes into crisis mode about PR nightmare, she proposes the first solution that comes to mind. Fake dating. Luckily, Galvin seems game. Galvin Barker is used to being a constant disappointment. What? Which is why he can't and won't commit to a relationship. This guy is self-flagellating. Unfortunately for him, his last girlfriend used her vast social media power to make sure everyone knows how much Galvin, quote, underperforms, unquote. Oh, he's a constant disappointment with his phallus. Fake dating for Jessica's book, she doesn't know about his phallus, promotion seems like the perfect cover, and maybe she can teach him something along the way about what his phallus, hookups, quote, for science, unquote, and some seriously sweet gestures later, Jessica and Galvin's fake dates are feeling more authentic than any of their previous relationships did. Have they replaced unrealistic expectations with unexpected realness? The realness of his underperforming phallus? That's Unrealistic Expectations by Andy J. Christopher. It can get in paperback for $17, September 26th, which has already happened, so it's available. Go get it right now. You can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, IndieBound, Powell's, Target, and you know they've made it when they are sitting, resting, pridely with their prideful little bellies on the shelves of Walmart. Well, with that, why don't we go back to the library and finish reading the rest of this kind of chapter? Well, there you are. Why don't you just relax, and I will continue reading to you this book. As a side note, I initially got this book from a used bookstore and thought, oh, this will be fun to read, but it's a really small book with 400 pages and it's got really small type. So I said, I'm not reading that. So I found this copy that I'm reading now on Amazon, in ebook form. And somebody just apparently scanned it in on their computer, and it's got a bunch of gobbledygook for a lot of words, and it's been a lot of horseshit. It turns out the book does have chapters, so that's pretty interesting, except that the chapters are like 70 to 80 pages long between each chapter, so nothing helps. So I'm just going to dive back into this and just kind of make it up as I go along. We'll see when I get tired of reading. Granny was at the door, frightened, wondering what had become of us. And while I told her in breathless jerks what had happened, Kim didn't say anything. He carried Joe into our cottage and laid him on the floor where Granny had spread out a blanket. Joe looked very small. I think he's broken his leg, said Kim. Granny nodded. And together they bound his leg with a stick, and it seemed like a dream to see Kim there in our cottage taking orders from Granny. Oh, he stood by while she bathed Joe's wounds and rubbed ointment onto him. And when she had finished, Kim said, I think you ought to see a doctor. It's better this way, said Granny firmly, because I had told her where we had found him. So Kim shrugged his shoulders and went away. We watched over Joe all that night, Granny and I, and we knew in the morning that he would live. I don't know, infections take a while to spread. You don't know if he's going to live. We were frightened. Joe lay on the blankets, too sick to care, but we cared. Every time we heard a step, we started up in terror, afraid that it was someone to come take Joe. Well, we talked about it in whispers. Granny, I pleaded, did I do wrong? He was there and he was big and strong and I thought he'd know how to open the trap. I was afraid, Granny, afraid that you and I wouldn't get Joe out. You did right, Granny B soothed me. A night in the trap would have killed our Joe. Then we fell into silence, watching Joe, listening for footsteps. Granny, I said, do you think he'll? I couldn't say. He seemed kind, Granny, different from some. He did seem kind, said Granny. But he's a friend of the St. Lamsons, Granny. That day that I was at the wall there, he mocked me like the rest. Granny nodded. Footsteps near the cottage, a rap on the door. Granny and I were there simultaneously. Meliora Martin stood smiling at us, Oh, she looked pretty in mauve and a white gingham dress, white stockings, and her black buckled shoes. And on her arm she carried a wicker basket, which was covered by a white cloth. Good afternoon, said Meliora in her high, sweet voice. Neither Granny and I answered. We were both too relieved to show anything but our relief. I heard, went on Meliora, so I brought along this for the invalid. She held out her wicker basket. Granny took it and said, for Joe, Mariola. I can speak. Nodded. I saw Mr. Kimber this morning, and he told me how the boy had an accident climbing a tree, so I thought he might like these. Granny said in a voice meeker than I had heard her use before, thank ye, miss. Meliora smiled. I hope you'll be well soon, she said. Good afternoon. We stood at the door, watching her as she walked away, and then without speaking, we carried the basket inside. Oh, under the cloth were eggs, butter, a half-roasted chicken, a loaf of homemade bread. And Granny and I looked at each other. Kim was going to tell. We had nothing to fear from the law. I was silent, thinking about my prayer in the woods, and how, providentially, it seemed I had received help. I had snatched the opportunity given, and I had taken a great risk. But I had won. I had rarely felt as happy as I did in that moment. And later, when I thought I owed Kim, I told myself that I would always remember. Joe took a long time to recover. I used to lie in his blanket with Squab beside him for hours, doing nothing, saying nothing. He couldn't walk for a long time, and when he began to, we realized that this had made a cripple of him. We didn't remember very much about the trap, only the terrifying moment when he had walked into it and he had heard it snap as it crunched his bones. Unfortunately, pain had sent him into speedy oblivion. There was no scolding him, no use telling him it was his fault. He shouldn't have done what he did. But he was listless for many weeks, and it was only when I brought him a rabbit with an injured foot that he began to cheer up. That's weird. In looking after the rabbit, he regained some of his spirits, and during that time, it was like having the old Joe back. Oh, I could see that I would have to make sure he always came to some maimed creature to care for. Winter came. Oh, well, it was a hard one. Winters were harder inland than they'd been on the coast. But even so, the Cornish winters were unusually mild. This year, however, the wind turned from the usual southwest and came from the north and east, bringing blizzards with it. The Fetter mine, where many of the villagers now worked, was not yielding the tin that it had up until now, where the rumors that it might be in a few years become an old scat ball. Christmas came, and there were hampers of food from the abbess, a custom which they had kept through the centuries, and we were allowed to gather kindling from some parts of the woods. Oh, it wasn't like the last Christmas, because Joe wasn't able to run about, and we had to face the fact that his leg would never be right. Still, the events of that night were too recent for us to complain. Oh, we all knew what Joe had narrowly escaped, and we weren't likely to forget. Troubles don't come singly. Oh, it must be in February that Granny took a chill. She was hardly ever ill, so we didn't take much notice during the first few days. But then one night, after coughing awakened me, and I'd scrambled down from the towel fat to get her some of her own syrup. It soothed her temporarily, but it didn't cure the cough. And a few nights later, I heard her talking, and to my horror, I discovered that she didn't know who I was when I went to her. She kept calling me Pedro. Well, I was terrified that she was going to die, for she was very ill. I sat beside her all that night, and in the morning she stopped being delirious. And when she was able to tell me what herbs to brew for her, I felt better. I nursed her for 3 weeks on her instructions, and gradually she began to recover. Well, she was able to walk about the cottage, but then she went out. Her cough started again. All right, whatever. So I made her stay in. I gathered some herbs for her and made a few of the brews, but there were many which needed her special skill. In any case, not so many people came to ask for advice now. They were getting poorer, and so were we. Moreover, I heard some of them questioning the power of Granny B. But she couldn't cure herself, could she? That boy of hers was a cripple, wasn't he? And all he'd done was fall off a tree. It seemed as though Granny B was so wonderful after all. Those tasty joints of pork did not come our way. Oh, there were no grateful clients now to leave sacks of peas or potatoes on our doorstep, and we had to eat sparingly if we wanted to eat twice a day. We had flour, so I made a kind of mansion in the old clome oven. It tasted good. And we kept a goat who gave us milk, but we couldn't feed her properly, and we got less milk. One day at breakfast, I spoke to Granny of an idea that had come to me during the night. The three of us were sitting at the table, our bowls before us containing what we called sky blue and stinkers. A dish which was being eaten in a great deal that winter, and it was made of water with a dash of skim milk, which we got cheaply from the farmer, who sold what he didn't need for his pigs. We boiled this and dropped pieces of bread into it. Oh, there was a tinge of blue in the liquid, and the bread always sank at the bottom of the bowl, hence its name. Granny, I said, I reckon I ought to be bringing something in. She shook her head, but when I saw the look in her eyes, I was near 13. Whoever heard of a girl in my station who wasn't Granny B's granddaughter living at ladies' leisure? Granny knew that something would have to be done. Joe couldn't help, but I was strong and healthy. We'll think about it, she said. I was wondering what she meant. Like, I reckon I ought to be bringing something in, like wood. Like the groceries, but she just means money. Okay. Well, let's think about it. I have thought. What? She asked. What is there? Oh, that was the question. I could go to Farmer Pankster and ask if he wanted someone to help in the dairy with the animals in the kitchens. There'd be plenty yearning to give their services if he did. Where else? One of the houses of the gentry? I hated the thought. All my pride rose in revolt, but I knew it had to be. It might only be for a time, said Granny. In the summer, I'll get on my feet again. I couldn't bear to look at Granny, or I should have told her that I would rather starve than work, as I was suggesting. But I wasn't the only one to be considered. There was Joe, who had this terrible misfortune, and then there was Granny herself. If I were away working, they would have to have my share of the sky blue and sinkers, and my share of potatoes and bacon. I'll put myself up at Treelinkit Fair next week. I hate these words, I said firmly. Treelinkit Fair was held twice a year in the village of Treelinkit, a good 2 miles from St. Lawrencetown. We had always gone to it, Granny, Joe, and I, in the old days. And those were red letter days for us. Granny B would dress her hair with special care, and we would walk proudly through the crowds. She used to take some of her cures and sell them to a stallholder, who bought as many as she could provide. And then she would buy us gingerbread or a fairing, whatever. But this year, we had nothing to sell. And as Joe couldn't walk the 2 miles to the fair, everything had changed. I set out alone, with my heart like a piece of lead, my pride debased. How many times walked through the fair had Granny and uncrippled Joe? Had I glanced at those men and women who stood in the hiring platform and been so happy because I was not like them? It seemed to be the depth of degradation that men and women should have to hire themselves out. It was like being in a slave market, but it was what had to be done if one needed work. For employers came to the fair for the purpose of hiring likely-looking servants. Now, today, I was to be one of them. It was a bright spring day, and somehow the sunshine made it worse. I envied the birds, who seemed mad with joy after the unusually hard winter. In fact, I was ready to envy everyone that morning. Once the fair had offered a feast of enjoyment, I had loved the besweed of it. Is this a real word, or is this another screw-up in the book? No results. Nope, nothing. I think it's a screw-up in the book. The smell, the noise, everything that made up Trinklet Fair. On the refreshment stalls, there was hot beef, boiled goose. You watched them cooking on fires beside the stalls. And there were stalls of pies, golden patsy enclosing the delicious contents baked the day in some sort of farmhouse kitchen or cottage oven. The stallholders called out the tantalizing descriptions as the people strolled past. Try a piece of this old muggety, my dear. Reckon you ain't never tasted the like. One of them cut open a pie to display the entrail of sheep or calves, which was muggety, or those of pig, which were nat dins. I hate all these words. A special treat was the tattage pies, hate this, made with sucking pig, and the more common squab or pigeon pie was there too. People would stand by the stalls, sampling and budging the pies to take them with them. There was that part of the fair where the cattle were on show, and there were cheap jacks selling almost everything you could think of. Old boots and clothing, saddlery, pots, pans, and even clove ovens. And there were the fortune tellers and the healers and those who shouted the merits of their medicines and who had been customers of Granny B. And close by the spot where a goose was being roasted over an open fire was the hiring platform. Oh, I viewed it with shame. Several people were already standing there, and they looked like a wretched, dejected lot. No wonder. Who could enjoy displaying themselves for hire? And to think that I, Karen Sakarli, must join them. Oh, I thought I should hate the smell of roasting goose forever after. Everyone around me seemed to be laughing. The sun had turned hot, and I felt angry with the whole world. But I had given my word to Granny that I would stand for hire. I could not go back and tell her that my heart had failed me right at the last moment. I couldn't go back and be a burden to them, so I, who was well and strong, resolutely, I approached the platform and mounted the rickety wooden steps at the side, and I was standing there among them. Prospective employers regarded us with interest, weighing up our possibilities. I saw Farmer Pangaster among them. Oh, and he took me. If he took me, it wouldn't be too bad. He was reckoned to be good to his work people, and I should be able to take little tidbits home to the cottage. Oh, it should ease my bitterness considerably if I could go home now and then play the Lady Bountiful. Then I saw two people who made me start back in dismay. Oh, I recognized them as the butler and the housekeeper at the Abbess. Only one purpose could have brought them to the fair, and they were making straight for the hiring platform. Now that I was beginning to be frightened, I had been a dream of mine that one day I should live at St. Lamston Abbess. Oh, I had lived that dream. Because Granny B had told me that if you created a dream and did all you could to make it come true, I was almost certain in time it would come true. Now I saw this dream of mine could easily come true. I could live at the Abbess as a servant. Hundreds of images flitted through my mind. I thought of young Justin St. Lamson haughtily giving me orders, of Johnny jeering at me, reminding me I was a servant. Of Meliora having to drink tea with the family and myself standing by the end cap and apron to serve them. I thought of Kim there. There's another thought, too. Ever since Granny had confided in me the day in the woods that I had a good deal about that Sir Justin, who was the father of the present one, that they were very much alike and that I was like Granny. And there was a possibility that what had happened to Granny might happen to me. I burned with rage and shame at the thought. Oh, they're coming nearer, talking earnestly, and then scrutinizing one of the hiring girls who's about my age. What if they should pass along the line? What if they should choose me? Well, I was wrestling with myself. Should I leap from the platform and just run home? I pictured myself explaining to Granny, and she would understand. Hadn't it been my suggestion, not hers, that I should come at all? Then I saw Meliora, dainty and fresh and mauve, gingham with a flounced skirt and a neat close-fitting bodice, neck and sleeves edged with lace, with white stockings and black walking shoes with straps. And her fair hair showing from under her straw bonnet. The moment I saw her, she saw me. And in that second, I was unable to hide my apprehension. Well, she came over swiftly, her eyes troubled, and she stood right before me. Karen, sir, she said my name softly. Well, I was angry because she had seen me in my humiliation. And how could I help hating her, standing there, neat, clean, fresh, so dainty and free? You hiring yourself? Yeah, it would seem so, I answered, reluctantly. But you haven't before. Times are hard, I muttered. The pair from the Abbess were coming near, the butler already his eyes on me, and they were shining in a warm and speculative manner. A look of excitement came to Meliora's face, and she caught her breath and started to speak in a hurry, as though the words couldn't come out quickly enough. Karen, sir, we're looking for someone. Would you like to come to the parsonage? That was like a reprieve. The dream was not turning sour on me. I was not going to St. Lamston Abbess by way of the back door. If I did that, I felt a real dream would never come true. To the parsonage, I stammered. So you're here for the hiring? She nodded eagerly. Yes, we need ... someone. When will you be ready to start? Haggerty, the butler, was close to us now, and he said, Morning, Miss Martin. Good morning. Nice to see you, Miss. At the fair, Miss Holt and myself are here to find a pair of girls for the kitchens. And he was looking at me now, his little eyes shining. This looks likely, and he said, What's your name? I lifted my head haughtily. You are too late, I said. I am hired. There was a feeling of unreality in the air that day, and I had the impression that this really wasn't happening to me, that soon I would wake up and find myself on the towel fat, dreaming as always, or laughing with Granny B. And I was actually walking along beside Meliora Martin, and she had engaged me to work at the parsonage. She, a girl of my own age. Mr. Haggerty, Mrs. Holt had looked so astounded that they only gaped when Meliora said a gracious goodbye. Oh, they stared at us as we walked away, and I heard Mrs. Holt murmur, well, did he ever see the like? I glanced at Mariola, and I felt a vague alarm. Oh, I sensed that she was beginning to regret rash action. I was certain that she had not come to the fair to hire anyone, that she had acted on an impulse to save me from going to work at the Abbess, just as she had tried to save me from the mockery of the boys when she had found me in the wall. I asked, Is it all right? What? For you to hire me? It'll be all right. But we'll manage, she said. Oh, she was pretty when she smiled, and a sparkle and defiance in her eyes made her prettier. People turned to look at us as we went through the crowds, past the Chief Jack, who was shouting the merits of his wares. How a bottle of this or that would cure all the ills in the world. Past the roasted goose and the stall of fairings. We were such a contrast. She, so fair. Myself, so dark. She, so neat. Myself, though clean, for I had washed my smock and my hair that day before, so poorly dressed. She in her black shining boots. Myself, barefoot. It wouldn't occur to anyone that she had hired me. She led me to the edge of the field in which the fair was set up, and there was the pony and trap, which I knew belonged to the parsonage. And in the driving seat was the middle-aged governess whom I had seen often in Meliora's company. As she turned, she approached and said, good gracious, Meliora, what does this mean? Well, I presume that this referred to me, so my head shot up, and I gave the governess my haughtiest stare. Oh, Miss Kello, I must explain, began Meliora in an embarrassed flutter. Indeed, you must. The answer, pray do. This is Karensa, Carly. I've hired her. You've what? I've turned to Meliora, reproach in my eyes, and I had been wasting my time. If she had been playing some game of pretense, it was supposed to be some amusing sort of game. She shook her head, again, that disturbing habit of reading my thoughts. It's all right, Karensa, she said. Leave this to me. She talked as though I were a friend, not a hired girl. I could have liked Meliora if only rid herself of the bitter envy. I had imagined her foolish meek, quite dull. It wasn't true, though. There was a great deal of spirit in Meliora, as I was to discover. Now, it was her turn to be haughty, and I managed, very well. Get in, Karensa, Miss Kello, pray, drive us home. Now, Meliora, she was dragging, this Miss Kello. I judged her to be, in her early 40s. Her lips were tight, her eyes alert. I felt an extraordinary sympathy for her because she, in her superior way, was after all only a servant. This, retorted Meliora, still the haughty young lady, is a matter between myself and my father. We clip-clop along the road back to St. Lawrencetown, and none of us spoke as we passed the cottages and the blacksmith shops that came to the great church with its tall tower and the graveyard with its toppling tombstones. Beyond was the parsonage. Miss Kello drew up at the door. Meliora said, come on, Karensa, and I alighted with her, and Miss Kello drove the trap to the stables. I said, you hadn't any right to hire me, had you? Of course I had a right, she retorted. If I hadn't, you would have gone to the Abbess, and you would have hated that. How'd you know? Well, she smiled. I guessed. Now, how'd you know I won't hate it here? Oh, yeah, of course you won't. My father's the best man in the world, and he wanted to be happy in this house. I have to explain to him, though. She hesitated, uncertain what to do with me. Then she said, come with me. Well, seems a good place to stop. Why don't we go down to the smoking room and perhaps have a cigarette while I explain to you, what the hell we just read. Well, there you are. Go on. Light one of these Camel cigarettes that I have here on the table, here in my smoking room. And we can give the birds cancer that my wife put in here for some weird reason. What do we learn from this? Well, the story's still getting going, but at least it's finally moving, so there's a little bit more to reflect on. Joe is trying to be some kind of bird Christ. He just keeps wanting to say birds all the time. So when all the rich people are hunting pheasants or whatever, he's out there trying to give them little splints. I don't know what he's doing, but like a dummy gets his leg stuck in a man trap. I always thought it was called a bear trap, but apparently it's called a man trap 100 years ago. So Squab, the dog whose name is Squab, helps Karensa find him. So isn't that nice? He's kind of like his own little lassie, which is adorable. He's not much use for anything else. So if she sees him there and he's just kind of, feeling gross, looking gross, but like, oh boy, this bird thing of mine, I'm really, it's really messing up my life. She can't open up the man trap, so she's just going to go out and maybe try to get her grandma to come help her. And she's like, yeah, grandma's hands are crap. Grandma's got no upper body strength. It's just all core strength. So in the end, she winds up running into Kim on the road. So then she finally gives in and tells this rich kid, God, my brother, go get him, help me with the trap, and please don't tell your parents because they're just going to kill him. Because it's back in an age where if a poor person does anything, rich people will kill you. So he says, I'll keep you secret. Goes and he undoes the trap. And then they bring him back to the house, and Granny B is putting the splint on. And oh boy, she's so impressed. Look at him. Look at him being all just polite to my grandmother. Maybe rich people aren't so bad. Then Granny B gets sick. And so then after that, she's like real bad and kind of hallucinating stuff. And so then she's like, crap, between my crippled brother and my sickly grandma, I got to go get a job. And at some point during that, she talks about going down to the market, and we get to learn about how Granny B's hair is just real amazing again. It's like reading Twilight, where every time Edward walked into a room, his hair was wet. Man, she'd talk about it for like 4 paragraphs. That's kind of what's happening here with this grandma's hair. I kind of wish I could see an example of what grandma's rich, dark, lustful hair looks like. But I'm never going to live that life. So she goes to get a job. No one's coming around for witchcraft anymore. Like, if you can't heal your kid because they said he fell out of a tree as a way of not getting killed by rich people. You can't heal your kid from falling out of a tree. And look at you're sick as hell. So they're not coming around for the witchcraft anymore. So she's got to go get a job. So she goes to market and she just stands on a platform like it's when Americans had slavery and they just make them stand on a platform. People would walk up and just look at them. That's kind of what's happening here, which is really odd. So apparently that's just a tradition that's just always been around for all sorts of reasons. Then she gets a job when Meliora sees her. Meliora isn't supposed to hire anyone, but she sees Karensa sitting up there and feels bad. So she doesn't want to get scooped up where she's got to work at the Abyss. So she says, come work for me, even though they don't have a job. So that's kind of where that ends. What do we learn from this? That it turns out the rich people that she had learned to hate because she's poor, the rich people, they're not that bad. At least a couple of them aren't that bad. So she's learning to like them. So now I imagine the next chapter, we just learn to like them more. When does the romance and the terrorized woman running across a field away from a big house, when does that happen? I don't know. It's on the cover of every gothic romance book ever made. As I do my social media, there's only one cover for this book, and it's kind of silly. So I just like, I'm just going to grab other gothic romance covers. And it's just always a woman in like a nightgown running away from a house. When does that happen here? We'll find out soon. But my God, this book is long. I was hoping to be done before October. That's just not going to happen. So, you're going to keep coming back anyways, whether I want you to or not, so at least I can waste your time with this, and then someday you'll lose interest and never come around again. And you'll leave me with the mice as I negotiate with them about how they've taken over my basement. Well, with that, thanks for listening, and I will probably see you next week. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people. Not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com, which just points you to my link tree. Everything's on the link tree. Just go to the link tree if you want to see where I am. And of course, Linktree has the dumbest URL in the world. linktr.ee/nuzzlehouse. It's the dumbest thing. If you go to nuzzlehouse.com, it's just going to reroute you over there after giving you some weird error about it not being secure. I hate it. I hate the internet. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, just in the curious mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly, glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdling or a dork. Now, back to business. Can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.